that all indicates a sort of an enforced regional political realignment of favorable administrations, and basically in order to do two things. One, remove Chinese influence from the Americas. That's undoubtedly a point of obsession for the Trump administration. And secondly, to open up the hemisphere to what you might term US extractivism and generate preferential markets for US companies. And absolutely, Venezuela is at the apex of those interests and markets.
On the front of the Times app and online this morning, you can see a video of American troops rappelling down from a helicopter onto an oil tanker. It's the start of an operation to seize a ship which the Americans say has been illegally taking oil from Venezuela to Iran. There's a massive American-US military buildup in the region, including an aircraft carrier, fighter jets and tens of thousands of troops. Latin American correspondent John Bonfiglio joins us now from Mexico. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So what exactly is going on here? I mean, the US doesn't usually seize tankers in this way. What's the justification? What's the argument behind doing it this time round?
So, yeah, the justification is that this tanker is part of Venezuela's so-called ghost fleet. The vessel appears to be a tanker called the Skipper, which had previously been highlighted as moving oil between Venezuela and Iran, avoiding international sanctions imposed on Venezuela. And that's the justification that's being given, is that this is an illegally operating vessel without proper permits, and as a result the US, in what obviously was designed as being characteristically primetime footage yesterday released by the US administration, that's the rationale behind the boarding and the seizure of the vessel. And actually, when Donald Trump was asked what he planned to do with the oil, he replied, to keep it, I suppose.
Is he legally justified, though, even given what you've said there? Can he make an argument for this legally?
What is legal and extrajudicial as regards the US justification is obviously a really big grey area, and what the US says is its actions are and can be based judicially, both nationally and internationally, does not often cross-reference to what international experts would say is legally justifiable.
And America, I think, had put sanctions on this same ship back in 2022.
Yeah, there's a whole interesting series of aspects related to oil in Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela has, as we know now with this standoff, has the largest known oil reserves on the planet. But at the same time, it's subject to wide-ranging international sanctions, of course, primarily on its oil. Now, these sanctions are imposed by the US, the EU, and a number of other countries. Notwithstanding, US oil giant Chevron continues to operate in the country on a new restricted waiver license, which was issued in the summer by the Trump administration at the same time as the military buildup began. There's a whole series of conflicting actions and behaviors that we have now seen for a number of months being enacted by the US administration based in and around Venezuela.
So I suppose that, people listening to this, John, will ask, is that really what Trump is doing here? I mean, he's talked a lot about trying to tackle the drugs trade, the drugs route, that's what he's doing in Venezuela. But a lot of people really believe that this is an American sort of ambition to take control or to have more control over a country that has significant reserves, which could be really useful to America.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to say there. Actually, to some extent, yesterday's play actually allowed Venezuela to sort of reach an international audience in saying that the act revealed the true motivations for the military standoff, which they said was not migrations, not drug trafficking, not democracy, not human rights, but Venezuela's natural wealth, its oil. I think it's pretty clear that Trump's motivation, actually as evidenced by his actions elsewhere across the Americas, whether it be the recent Honduras election interference, the sort of suggestion that there's going to be a forced takeover of Greenland if it's not handed over by Denmark, the proposed annexation of Canada, etc., that all indicates a sort of an enforced regional political realignment of favorable administrations, and basically in order to do two things. One, remove Chinese influence from the Americas. That's undoubtedly a point of obsession for the Trump administration. And secondly, to open up the hemisphere to what you might term US extractivism and generate preferential markets for US companies. And absolutely, Venezuela is at the apex of those interests and markets.
It'll be really interesting to see whether that has helped Venezuela make that argument publicly, this seizure of this tanker, or whether it does embolden Trump to go even further still. John, thank you very much for giving us your take this morning.
No problem, take care.
Thank you. You too. That is John Bonfiglio, their Latin American correspondent in Mexico.
Not entirely irrelevant to our conversation at the beginning of the programme about the ECHR. It strikes me that there's a spectrum here where there's a country that's completely locked into the ECHR, where its politicians make decisions, but they're constantly checked by the rule of law. So some people would argue to an impossible extent, all the way to the other side, which is Donald Trump, who seems to have no regard for the rule of law, but acts purely politically. He wants to get into the Americas. He's happy to kill drug dealers. He's happy to have his ICE people go after anyone in any circumstances, unshackled by the rule of law. And clearly, there's probably a part of the spectrum you want to hit, which is happy and sensible. But there are two opposing ends where you're overshackled by the law and you're not even restricted at all by it.
Well, I suppose technically Trump is shackled by the law. He just ignores it. And that's the argument here. I mean, there are some people who say, this country should just ignore the law.
Or just be a little bit, be 10% more Trump without being full Trump would be the argument.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. 033003 2353. We'll talk more about both of those stories throughout the programme.
We just discussed the accounts. We also are grateful. As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
Explain a little more about this Venezuelan oil tanker and share a little more information about that.
Well, I'll let the people do it, but you see the result, and I guess they probably have released the pictures by now or pretty soon. You'll discuss that with the appropriate people later on, but no, it was seized for a very good reason.
We're interested in the seizure of this tanker. Well, what happens to the oil on this ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Where does it go? What port does it go to?
Well, you have to follow the tanker. You're a good newsman. Just follow the tanker.
Do you know where we're going? Was it going
follow
to
it.
China?
Get a helicopter and follow the tanker.
Is it true it's going to
But
Cuba?
we're going to, I assume we're going to keep the oil.
Mr. President, on Fed Chair, Kevin Hassett said you were going to announce your decision within the next 2 weeks.
President Donald Trump said on Wednesday the U.S. has seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. The move raised oil prices and is likely to further inflame tensions between Washington and Caracas.
As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening.
Attorney General Pam Bondi said the tanker had been used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. The seizure could signal new and intensifying efforts to go after Venezuela's oil, the country's main source of revenue. The Venezuelan government did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Trump has ordered a massive U.S. military buildup in the region, including an aircraft carrier, fighter jets, and tens of thousands of troops. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has alleged that the U.S. military buildup is aimed at overthrowing him and gaining control of the OPEC nation's vast oil reserves. Since early September, the Trump administration has carried out more than 20 strikes against suspected drug vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, killing more than 80 people. Experts say the strikes may be illegal, since there has been little to no proof made public that the boats are carrying drugs, or that it was necessary to blow them out of the water rather than stop them, seize their cargo, and question those on board.